Greetings. This episode is the third in my series about how to write a novel, or as I'm also calling it, So You Think You Want to Write a Novel. This one is entitled Impetus, What Starts Your Novel Writing Process. Stay tuned. I believe that when we craft a story, there has to be a spark. That spark may be, first bullet point, a person or group of persons, such as family with a certain trait, life situation, job, medical condition, superpower, or such. Or, second bullet point, an image in our minds of something happening, a discovery, a violent act, a happy act or occurrence. Parentheses here, though, I don't think we really write novels about happiness, as the famous beginning of Anna Karenina by Tolstoy goes. If you're not familiar with that, you need to be. That image in our mind might also be a memory, a death, or something unexpected. And third bullet point, a series of events that hangs together, like a personal anecdote or short narratives. That's a spark. That's all it is. But a spark can do a lot of good things and a lot of damage too. I believe this spark idea because it's how I write. I can tell you the impetus or spark or seed of all my novels. They are either based on a part of a person, not the whole person, an image in my head, or a narrative. Actually, most of them probably come from a collection of unconnected or disparate, or maybe not totally unconnected sparks. I often compare fiction writing to quilting, but in the old-fashioned organic sense. Quilting is my thing when it comes to arts and crafts, although I have one on a bed right now that needs the actual stitching by hand, since I choose not to invest in a huge quilting sewing machine. Today, quilting is controlled and fabricated and prefabricated. And as an art form, it is sometimes not even functional. I would refer you to the Southeastern Quilt Museum podcast I did in fall 2024 and to their website. And if you're ever in Carrollton, Georgia, you can go by. Very nice people. Those quilts are masterpieces, but they hang on walls. They don't keep a family warm. Some are quite avant-garde and made out of everything but cotton patches. It's the old ones that fascinate me, though. First, because they're old and have a provenance and a story. And secondly, because they were functional. And third, I think because they were made up, and I'm going to use this word probably incorrectly, the detritus of life. I always thought it was pronounced detritus, or somehow fancier, but apparently it is detritus. And by that, I mean the leftover blankets, worn out clothes, things of that sort. There was one exhibit at the Southeastern Quilt Museum when I visited it in the summer of two quilts made from little silk squares that were collected by the quilter. I believe this was in Texas in the early 1900s. The squares were of the states and of countries, and they either came in or could be obtained through a coupon found in cigarette packs of the time. The two quilts were beautiful and had a South Asian flair to them, although knowing they represented all that smoking took some of the appeal from it. They have other quilts from the 1800s made of wood and cotton clothing, wool, and cotton clothing, and they were stitched together to be strong and warm, not hang on a wall. I have a quilt my grandmother made from old polyester dresses of hers. It's not much to look at, and it's not even warm, but it has a lot of meaning for me. So what's the connection here? Fiction is a pulling together of the leftovers of experience into another narrative. It's not a biography or memoir. That's something entirely different. It's an image here, a character there, an incident from elsewhere, et cetera, and a lot of imaginative connectivity or connection all put into a framework that has to cohere as a story along the lines of what we humans have come to expect in a story over many millennia. The novel itself was not invented, and I put that in air quotes, as they say, until recently in history. Well, there are disputes on this. But a commonly held belief that I was taught back in the day in my master's program in English is that the first one is Don Quixote by Miguel Saavedra de Cervantes in the 1600s. I think it's brilliant, ironic, meta, and funny. The Center for Fiction, however, says no. And I'm about to read a quote to you about what they say is the first novel. Quote, the world's first novel is thought to be The Tale of Genji, written in 11th century Japan by a woman known to us only as Murasaki Shikibu. The short biography of her that accompanies the novel's modern Penguin edition translation says, after the death of her husband, she cloistered herself to study Buddhism, raise her daughter, and write the world's first novel, Genji Monogatari, The Tale of the Shining Prince Genji. Now, I want to camp on this a bit. First, it is trendy to say that a woman from a non-Western country was the first to do anything. And there's a second view that the first modern Western novel was La Princesse de Clèves, published in 1678 by Madame de Lafayette in France. And you will forgive some of my pronunciation here. It should not be a surprise, though, that the first novelists were women, and I should say women of wealth or means. I would be able to name a whole lot more women novelists than male ones, really. I still, in my mind, put Cervantes first, though, because Don Quixote is so clever. What I want to also add, though, is this quote from the same article on the Center for Fiction website. And I recommend that website. Quote, that night at the temple, the full moon of the 8th lunar month shone up from the lake's waters, and while she lost herself in its beauty, a vision of the tale rose before her. She saw her hero, Genji, languishing in unjust exile on the shore of a moonlit sea. And the image was so compelling that, lest she forget it, she immediately wrote down what became chapters 11 and 12. After that, the legend says, she simply added the others until she had 54 in all. End quote. Aha! My theory of the quilting of a narrative to make a novel is proven by the story of the first novelist. So there you go. I suspect many people want to write a novel based on family experiences, but want to fictionalize it. And in that thinking, different names, places, and details to protect the innocent. That is common, and a lot of them probably get published, but you need more than experiences, because the experiences and memories and images and people have to be crafted into a narrative format. And I should add a narrative that is compelling for someone else, meaning it has drama, conflict, and a what's going to happen next idea, rather than a list of things that happened in the family. A colleague who teaches screenwriting says there are two plots. A hero goes on a journey and a stranger comes to town. I am also suspicious of easy formula for something as huge and wonderful and unmanageable as the novel or fiction and storytelling in general. But that's kind of an interesting binary to me because it's so embedded in our culture. People who write about these subjects love to resort to Star Wars to prove their points. Since George Lucas wrote it based on Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. But you know, a lot of great stuff was written before Joseph Campbell showed up. So Dostoevsky and Twain and Austen and for sure Dickens and Gaskell and the Brontes or Collins or Forster didn't have that hero's journey formula or Save the Cat Writes a Novel to go by. Yes, I guess you can put all these works sort of into that binary. Mr. Darcy is the stranger who comes to town. Anna Karenina goes on a journey. She's not very heroic, though, unless you think she's a hero for standing up for society. Tolstoy didn't, and she's a tragic character. However, that two-sided approach to the beginning of a story isn't necessarily the impetus upon which you build your story. I am reading Octavia Butler's book, Kindred, which is about time travel. I think her impetus was sort of a what if, which I think is a great impetus framework. For her is, what if a modern African-American woman is mysteriously transported back and forth in 1815 Maryland, Eastern Shore no less, to a slaveholder's estate? And I just want to say here, was raised in Maryland, so that part of Maryland at that time was very Southern, not so much now. I am also reading, yes, I read several books at once, Silo, the Hugh Howey novel on which the TV show is based. And it's on Apple TV, if you want to get into that. It's very good, but it's sort of monotone or monochrome, I should say, as well, in the color. Not much color. What if 10,000 people live for hundreds of years in a massive, self-contained cylindrical tube lodged deep in the earth and can't go outside without dying? That's actually the pitch, not the writer's start. Or maybe his impetus was a vision he had of people living in his dark, underground, vertical world, and he started there. Or his what if might have been, what if after the nuclear destruction that we all know is coming, right? People live in a hole in the ground but don't know why. On that point, I don't know. I really just know my own impetuses or sparks. For example, a young Hispanic woman is strangled near a creek by her boyfriend's jealous, disturbed brother and left for dead. That impetus was just a picture I had in my mind, a vision, really. Another one is a Black church is burned down during the Civil Rights era in a small Southern town, and no one ever really solves it. The impetus was a bombing in the 1960s in the Georgia town I lived in for many years, and that was a cold case for decades. A third one is a lonely woman who lives by taking care of mothers who have just had their babies, gets stuck in the home of 4 orphan children during the 1918 flu pandemic. This impetus was really from 2 realities my mother told me about from her childhood. However, the spark is not enough. After the spark of imagination or inspiration, the hard work starts. So the rest of this is about the most central part of any fiction, but especially literary, character. Often it is said that the character has to want something. I think that sometimes that want has to develop in the writer's mind over a process of time. We have to write about our character for a while before we know them well enough to know what they really want. A character always exists in a context. That doesn't mean a character in the 17th century Rome has no human relation to a person today, but that the character is not going to transcend their time and place and still be believable. So along with wanting something, which may not be immediately obvious, the character lives somewhere at some time and some external forces play into their lives. If it's 1863 in Middle Georgia, the character is not going to be unaffected by the Civil War, no matter who they are. A nun in a convent, a ne'er-do-well gambler, or a slave. So I am of the opinion that context and want are the 2 things that must be worked out, researched, stitched together, played with, however you want to put it, before you can really start to craft the novel's plot. I think you have to also be careful not to be too certain about the outcome of the plot. That is the one thing that makes genre fiction, not the only thing, but one of them, such as romances, mysteries, different from literary fiction. In a romance, the couple gets together and there's no unrequited love. In mysteries, the detective or cop gets the killer. No ambiguity. I have had people tell me that my character, Cortella, should get together with the man she comes to love. But I have to make it clear that he is looking elsewhere for his second wife. He's widowed. He respects and cares about Cortella, but to me, it would not have been realistic or the story I wanted to tell if it was that patently happily ever after. As a side note to this, if you are writing a novel to make a point, stop right there. If you want to show that hard work always brings good rewards, or that free trade is the salvation of the world, or that a certain group is oppressed and victimized by another with no agency, or that we are all going to be living in a vertical tube because of the worldwide meltdown from nuclear power. Not the point of Silo, by the way. Well, just rethink that. Not that some good novels have been written with those viewpoints, but that's going to be more of an exception to the rule than the rule. This is why I am skeptical about the prefabricated novel structures, although they are a good place to start. I'll talk about two. I recently read a book by Donald Miller, who wrote the evangelical world's classic Blue Like Jazz in the 90s. He had a great phrase in that book that was worth it for me. We all have a self-addiction. Oh my, don't we? From his book, Story Brand Marketing, he states this basic plot line. A character has a problem who meets a guide who gives them a plan and calls them to action that ends in a success and helps them avoid failure. Luke Skywalker has lost his family because of evil people, i.e. his dad, sorry, spoiler, and meets Obi-Wan, who sends him off in space and he saves the universe. Well, this is super simplified from the hero's journey, which is, now I'm going to be going into this long section here on this hero's journey, so you may want to pause and come back to it. The hero's journey starts, number one, the call to adventure. This is the moment when the hero receives a call to adventure, which could come in the form of a message, a dream, or an encounter with a mentor or guide. Number two, the refusal of the call. At this stage, the hero may initially refuse the call to adventure, often due to fear, doubt, or a sense of inadequacy. Three, meeting the mentor. The hero encounters a mentor or guide who provides support, advice, and guidance on the journey ahead. Now, you're probably seeing, yes, this is definitely Star Wars, the first one at least. Fourth step, crossing the threshold, where the hero leaves behind the known world and crosses the threshold into the unknown, often encountering tests, trials, and challenges along the way. Number five, tests, allies, and enemies. The hero must navigate a series of tests, trials, and challenges, often with the help of allies and the opposition of enemies. Definitely. Six, the approach to the inmost cave. The hero approaches the innermost cave or the heart of darkness, often facing their greatest fears and challenges. Number seven, the ordeal. This is the moment of the hero's greatest challenge, where they face a major obstacle or enemy and must overcome it to continue their journey. Eight, the reward. The hero achieves a reward, often in the form of knowledge, insight, or a powerful object that helps them on their journey, the road back. The hero begins the journey back, often encountering new challenges or obstacles along the way. Step 10, the resurrection. The hero experiences a moment of death and rebirth, often symbolized by a physical or metaphorical transformation. 11th step, the return. The hero returns home, transformed and changed by their experiences, armed with new knowledge and insights that they can use to benefit their community. And step 12 of the hero's journey, the freedom to live. The hero achieves a state of freedom and enlightenment, often living happily ever after. We're in a state of balance and harmony. I think as you listen to those and as I read through them, I see elements of them in some of the great sagas, definitely Lord of the Rings, definitely Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, especially the Odyssey, but not every single part of it. So I wonder if this is not meant to be everything that could possibly happen versus everything that should happen in the hero's journey, because I don't see all of these happening in all of those epics and big stories. But it's very interesting, and I think even in other books, you might see some of these archetypes and these plot points. Now, recently I read and have written about Save the Cat writes the novel. And I'm going to go through its basic steps. They come from the world of screenwriting, and I think they are helpful. And they're helpful because you really have to have a way of framing your story. And I'll get to that after I talk through the Save the Cat. Number 1, opening image, snapshot of hero with their world beforehand. Number 2, theme stated, briefly alludes to the transformative journey that your hero will take and the flaw or flaws they will eventually conquer. 3, setup, sets up your hero's life and their status quo world before everything changes. This is a multi-scene beat, whereas the first is a short one. I would add here, I think it's like the opening of Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark with the big action scene versus his longer scenes as a professor where he gets into the going to look for the Ark. Catalyst is number 4, disrupts the status quo world with a life-changing event. 5, debate, shows how resistant the hero is to change and or prepares them for a break into Act 2. Now remember, this is from screenwriting, so screenwriting always has 3 acts. 6, break into Act 2, brings the hero to the upside-down world of Act 2, where they will fix things the wrong way. They're off on their journey and facing obstacles. So you can see how this is connected to the hero's journey. A lot of parallels. Step 7, the B story introduces the character who will somehow represent the B story, spiritual story theme, and help your hero learn it. This could be a mentor, the love interest, even a nemesis who teaches them something somehow. 8, fun and games, delivers on the premise of the novel and how your hero is faring in the new Act 2 world, either having fun or floundering. 9, midpoint, marks the middle of the novel with either a false defeat or a false victory, while at the same time raising the stakes of the story. Okay, let me stop there. Your head is exploding. Whoa, what is this about? Raising the stakes? That's a way of showing something is at risk and they might very well lose. It's totally up for grabs that they might lose or fail. A lot of what we watch on TV has none of this. I think Hallmark movies and Downton Abbey are the worst this could be. In Downton Abbey, there's always seems like something terrible is going to happen, but then it all works out. Good storytelling leaves the outcome at least a reasonable surprise. This is a topic for another podcast as to how that comes about, but it has to be consistent with what came before, not some out of the blue kind of thing. Raising the stakes also means the reader cares. The reader is invested in the character and wants to keep reading, so they feel like something might be losable, so to speak. Also a wow at this point. How many more of these steps are there? There's 7. They get a little interesting, but if you feel like, I can't do all this without my story, it's not what it's about, well, I have 2 answers for that. It may that you are and can, you just don't realize it. My descriptions here are short. Yes, it's sort of formulaic, and that was my feeling when I first read it, until I realized my books did these without me knowing. On the other hand, is anything really happening in your story? I get asked to read a lot of fiction for people and critique it. I read one time 150 pages of a draft, and I still didn't know what the central conflict was, what the character wanted and why. The first 4 pages were descriptions of the woman sitting in her bathtub contemplating bubbles. Folks, something has to happen. Literary fiction does not mean no story or boring. It means the character is more of a driver than a prefabricated plot. So let's go through the rest of them. Number 10, bad guys close in. It provides a place for your hero to rebound after a false defeat at the midpoint, or fall down or after a false victory at midpoint, all while the internal bad guys, which could be flaws, not necessarily real bad guys, are closing in. 11, all is lost, which illustrates the hero's rock bottom moment, lowest of the story. And this is supposedly at 75% point of the book. 12, Dark Night of the Soul shows how your hero reacts to all is lost and how they eventually break through to a resolution. And you can see this moment in a lot of movies where it seems like they're going to be down, but something happens. They think of something, they remember something, they remember they have some weapon or whatever, and they break through. Number 13, break into Act 3, brings the hero into the synthesis world of Act 3, where they will finally fix things the right way. 14, the finale, resolves all the problems created in Act 2 and proves that your hero has learned the theme and it's been transformed. Oh, brother. And 15, the final image, after snapshot of the hero and their changes. I really liked the All is Lost and the Dark Night of the Soul. I think those need to be in a book to make it interesting. Some of the other parts, maybe not. I do recommend that you get a sense of these. Although, to be honest, reading about 100 good novels will do the same in getting them into your DNA rather than as a Band-Aid to your approach. Most people don't want to take the time to read 100 good novels. And I only say that because it took me many, many years to do that. Some literary novels get a little too wrapped up in their own consciousness and self-importance or technique. And some of the best ones were written in a time when length was a plus. So I'm not saying go out there and read 100 Moby Dicks. So we're back to a person in a context who wants something but cannot easily get it, either because of their own self, opposing forces, or an ideological conflict. That might be faithfulness to government or versus God, love of one child over another, something like that. Even if your impetus is a vision or something else, to have a novel, that image must fit into that core that will start the story moving. I want to end this with the connection of truth and fiction. Someone said, although I may be loosely paraphrasing them, fiction is lies that tell the truth. I suppose the idea that fiction is lies is acceptable, except that we all already agree that fiction is made up. So even if the lying is intentional, it's intentional under an understanding that allows it. It's just that the term lying has a moral cast to it that doesn't really fit here. There is no immorality in telling lies in fiction in general, although I think there can be some immorally written fiction in that it doesn't tell the truth with the lies. Here, the distinction is between factuality and truth, which is a hard one for some. Better, I would say, fiction is imaginative, acceptable lying that reveals the truth about the human condition. That is not the same as writing to make a point. Leo Tolstoy wrote of a woman who committed adultery. The story is far more complex than that she ran off with her lover. Why did she? Because she didn't understand herself? Or she didn't understand her husband or her lover or morality or the consequences? Because of self-deception? Because her husband was cold and mean and her lover so good and kind? And people debate over all of those things. That's why it's a great book. And that's to say nothing of the other two massive storylines in Anna Karenina, which is embedded in late 19th century Russia, where serfdom has ended, but the society doesn't know how to get past aristocracy to democratic forms of government like the rest of the world. He wrote about human truth in a real context, but yes, it was all a lie in a sense. That's what we do. So, this is the addendum. Just want to remind you that you can find out more about my books and me and where I will be for speaking and things of that sort at my website, barbaragrahamtucker.net. That will link you to where you can buy my books, either from me or from a bookseller, and give you some more information, as well as a blog where I write about writing and creativity. Hope you'll visit. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.